All right. Am I it, or is no one's introducing anything? Right? I have to work with this. No? Okay. I'll get started. I just pulled the date off, but the date is from the format. It is not from 2006. But was anybody in the presentation I did last semester? You're all new to this? You were? Okay. So all of you have never seen anything about innovation and entrepreneurship in EPICS. Okay. Is anybody in the Certificate in Entrepreneurship and Innovation program? One. How many classes have you taken? You are too? Oh, you will be next year? Okay. All right, I'll talk a little bit about that afterwards. But can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. How many of you are interested in innovation and entrepreneurship? Okay. Anybody want to be an entrepreneur at some point? All right, not bad. Has anybody even thought about it? Do engineering students come into engineering school thinking about being entrepreneurs? You think? Now, our research shows that not tons of them do, nor do they get really exposed to it very much, because a lot of your faculty may not be entrepreneurs. But then if you look at people who actually create companies, oftentimes they are engineers. If you look at a lot of the tech companies that are created, it might not be when you're 22 years old, but MIT and Stanford have done big economic development studies. And when you look at where all these tech companies are coming from, oftentimes they have been created by engineering and computer science students. Okay, so I am Nathalie Duval Couetil, and I am the director of the Certificate in Entrepreneurship and Innovation program. I'm also associate director of the Entrepreneurship Center. So I have been at Purdue doing entrepreneurship things since about 2005, when really we started kind of a cross-campus initiative to get not just business students involved in entrepreneurship, but try to get the entire campus thinking about entrepreneurship. Because if you think about it, you're the people making the stuff, right? Oftentimes business students aren't going to business school because they're making stuff. They're learning about business. So, and that goes for ag and whatever else it is. And really our vision here at Purdue has been that it really should be a complement to your major, right? You can't be an entrepreneur in entrepreneurship. But if we can give you some entrepreneurship education along with your engineering degrees or whatever your degree might be, that's kind of a more powerful combination. So I'm here just to give you an overview, and I think we missed one class, then we had the polar vortex, so I'm sorry about that. I do not know what happened. I know what happened with the weather, but I don't know what happened about the scheduling glitch a couple of weeks ago. But so what I do here is I run that program. I also do a lot of research with, and I've done a lot. The reason that I know kind of some of the data and the background on engineering students is because I've been involved in National Science Foundation grants, looking at engineering students in particular when it comes to entrepreneurship education, looking at their level of interest, looking at their exposure to it, looking at what motivates them for entrepreneurship. Oftentimes we think people are motivated by money, right? How many of you think entrepreneurs and business, it's all about making money? Is that your perception? But engineers aren't about that, right? You think they are? Okay. Well, I mean, we did looking at what motivates engineers. We looked at, it's a little complicated, but we were looking at factors, and this is based on data that we had. And it's really that creation and solution that motivates engineers, right? It's not about being a leader, it's not about making money, but it's finding those solutions to problems and really creating those solutions for society or for industry. Okay, other things I do here, in addition to running the undergraduate program, I teach a course with the professor in engineering, Professor Michael Laddish. Is anybody in agricultural and biological engineering knows Mike Laddish? And we teach, if you're ever a grad student, we teach a technology commercialization course called Life of a Faculty Entrepreneur, Discovery, Development, Translation. We have tons of people working on millions and millions of dollars of research here in laboratories. And the premise of this course is to get people thinking about, what are the applications of this research, and start really thinking about that as when they're doing the research. So All right, so I'll talk a little bit about all of this. I also do a lot in gender and entrepreneurship and women in leadership, and we even have a course on that as part of the certificate program. Okay, so I will show you, we have a little video I'll show you later, it just came out last week. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial process. All right, so what's the difference between an invention and an innovation? Yes?
Invention is the completely new idea or product, and innovation is something improved.
Okay, one way to think about it. Anybody else? What do we talk about when we mean innovation? And what do we talk about, what do we mean when we're talking about an invention? Come on. No idea? No? All right. It's a bit of a nuance. But Schumpeter is the famous person you always hear about who kind of came up with a lot of definitions around innovation and invention. So you can create an invention, right? And it can sit in a laboratory. And it's not an innovation unless it gets out to the marketplace and somebody wants it, somebody's willing to pay for it. So it's really, so he gives 5 different categories, right? So, but the point is you have to be able to make it at a price that somebody wants it and that it generates some revenue or gets in people's hands in an economically viable way, right? You may not make a profit, it might be some kind of social innovation, but the fact is it gets used out into the public. So 5 categories of combinations for innovations, right? It can be the introduction of a new good, so an entirely new product, or you can be improving the quality of something. That's an innovation, right? A new gadget that has a new feature, that's an innovation on something existing. It can be a new method or a new process, an entirely new market. So it's not even necessarily just creating a new product, but perhaps delivering something to an entirely different set of customers. It could be something based using new materials, or like the last one, the carrying out of a new organization of any industry, like the creation of a monopoly position, right? So it can be kind of a more business-oriented innovation or way to capture revenue. All right, so innovation. This is from a study that we did, and this had to do with, are you aware of ABET accreditation, being engineering students, right? So ABET is a huge deal in engineering, as you probably know. So Purdue has to align with ABET standards. So we were looking at a way to decrease resistance within engineering programs to entrepreneurship is if you can align engineering outcomes with entrepreneurial outcomes. So we kind of came up with a lot of kind of learning objectives that align engineering and business and categorized it along this continuum. So really, what we're trying to do in engineering programs now is you're always focused on kind of the innovation piece, right? Developing new products and processes, but really having students, look at this kind of more creativity end, right? Where do you get good ideas? How do you source good ideas? You look at trends in the marketplace. How do you do that research? Do you go talk to customers? Trying to teach that kind of piece, the opportunity piece. And then teaching more about, okay, so I developed something. Nowadays, if I'm going into a company, a lot of these companies, they don't want me to just invent. I don't just do one thing all day. I need to be able to talk to people, and I need to be able to talk to marketing. I need to be able to talk to customers to figure out what they need. I need to understand how do we cost out this thing? What's it going to cost? Are the customers going to want it at this cost? And understand some of these business principles. So we're trying to get students to think along this continuum, because that's essentially what you're going to have to do when you go out and get a job in most cases. Okay, so entrepreneurship, what kind of sets it apart? This is a really kind of basic way of looking at it, but if you think about it, entrepreneurs, people, are people who choose to take the entrepreneurial path instead of working for a company where they'll get a salary, right? So they make some kind of commitment, and it's in terms of their career, it's in terms of time, it's in terms of money, so they take some type of risk. And then they create this innovation, which can be new products, methods, markets. Okay, it has to create value for someone. If these things, like I said, you can create an invention. If it doesn't generate any value for anyone, you're not going to have a business. They have to meet a demand, so that's where the need and the customer need comes in. And they have to do it in a way that generates revenue, right? And so the goal of entrepreneurs often, it's to build wealth. And then oftentimes, entrepreneurs are the ones who end up putting money into that kind of, they may become angel investors or mentor other entrepreneurs, but typically often stay involved in the process. All right, so I'm like doing an entire, program in 20 minutes, but so market research is a huge part of entrepreneurship, right? If you work for a big company, hopefully they have a marketing department. I used to work for a consulting firm called Booz Allen in Hamilton, and we used to do market studies for big companies, whether it's Volvo or telecommunications companies. And it was kind of crazy. They would invite, they'd hire a bunch of consultants when they had roomfuls of market research, right? And they had marketing teams. But the point was we would come in more objectively and be able to look at all that market data and kind of go through it and make better recommendations than the people internally. We also had the ability to talk to other companies and things like that to get more objectivity. But entrepreneurs do the same, right? Because what is the point of developing a product if nobody wants it? So it's really about satisfying needs, not inventing something cool and it just being that invention. And wow, this is a really cool thing that does a whole bunch of things. I mean, if you invent something that has 10 features and customers only want 3 features, it doesn't matter how great those extra features are, right? So really understanding what the customers want and more importantly, what they'll pay for. And figuring out how you're going to sell it to whom, potential problems, pricing, things like that. And so you need to get a lot of data. All of those things reduce risk. Okay. All right. So the point of market analysis is that you want to be making or you want to be selling something that you already know a customer wants, right? So it's like the 2 puzzle pieces in this photo. And then, like I said, did anybody ever hear the term business model? Okay, can you give me an example of a business model? Anybody know a unique business model? How does Spotify make money? Subscriptions, right? So subscriptions are a business model and a really good one, right? If you can capture that revenue month after month and people are too lazy to stop it, that's great. It's better than selling something once and having to go back to the customer and resell it, right? Very efficient. I've been trying to stop all my subscriptions lately because, they kind of creep up on you. How about razors? What's the business model? Yes.
Well, you have to keep buying more razors.
Right.
You're done with an old one.
Right. So you get a cheap razor, and then you have to buy a lot of razor blades, typically at not the cheapest rate, right? Who has a printer? What's the business model?
You have to continue to buy ink and paper.
Right. Cheap printer and very expensive. Right, but it creates, you have a dependency, right? So they kind of lock you in. All right, so those are business models, and I believe Chris McAvoy, who's one of our instructors, he'll be here next week to talk more about that. But it's fun to look at products around you. It's not just selling one thing once, but really thinking creatively about how you can generate revenue streams. So for instance, years ago, your parents got their furnace, their furnace broke, and then they had somebody come and fix it. How are those heating and air conditioning companies making money now? Anybody in that business? Their parents in that business? It's by selling service contracts and things like that, right? You have the HVAC person come out twice a year. You pay, anywhere from $150 to $300 for that service, right? To do maintenance and things like that. So another way you might sell a product, but you also might provide some type of service. So, pay attention around you, how people are getting your money, right, for things that you like. Okay, so feasibility analysis, I won't go too much. I've talked a lot about this, but do you talk about this very much in some of your engineering classes? I know you touch on it a bit. No? Blank stares? Okay. So like I said, it's more of that understanding, is this viable? We're creating stuff, but is what we're creating viable? Do you have customers? Will they buy it? For how much? How can you make it? How can you deliver it? Can you do it at the price that they want? How will you transport it? How will you get it to them? How will you find the people with the talent that can actually execute all of this? Do you have the money to be able to find the people who can execute all of this? Okay, and people fall in love with their ideas a lot in entrepreneurship, right? And but your mom, your friends are not valid people to do market research with. But often I see a lot of students or university kind of entrepreneurs. It's very hard. It's against our psychological makeup to be very critical of our own ideas, right? So people tend to fall in love with their entrepreneurial ideas, and even if there's some data that doesn't make it seem as interesting, sometimes they've invested so much in it, they'll still want to keep going, even with data that says they may be off track. All right, business model. So Kindle is another good one, right? How's Amazon making money? Amazon's making money a whole bunch of different ways, right? Give me some examples. Yes?
Their web services.
Okay, like what?
They make most of their money from
Hosting, yeah.
hosting websites for different companies.
Yeah, what else? Yep.
Subscriptions.
Yep, right, Prime. That's a money maker, right? Every year you just keep collecting a bunch of money from people. They've got, do you ever see those, the renewal, right? If you buy ink cartridges or things like that, they want you to get on kind of they'll automatically ship them to you, even shampoo, whatever you want. So they've been very, very innovative with their business models. Okay, so money is another thing that we talk a lot, especially, anywhere, when it comes to tech companies. And this is an example here at the university. Can anybody kind of dissect that, what's called the Valley of Death? What do you think this means? Yes?
Well, it looks like from the model, you can look and try to do something and research it and put it in a test, what's it called? Some kind of test group. I can't remember what they're called, but some kind of test group or whatever. And then between that and then getting it on the actual market, it could die.
Right.
Might be a bad idea or something.
So the Valley of Death is something we talk a lot about at the university, because what are we doing in engineering programs at universities or science programs? Lots and lots of research, right? I think sometimes as students you don't realize how many millions and millions of dollars of funding your professors are getting to conduct research, and many of your professors are really leaders in their fields, and that's why they get those research grants. So the point is, the government provides a lot of that research money through National Science Foundation, or if you're in medicine, it could be the National Institute of Health, NIH funding, or it can be the Department of Agriculture if you're perhaps in an agricultural field. But Purdue gets lots of funding from those different agencies. But that funding is typically for basic research, right? We're not thinking about customers. We're not thinking about, how are we going to sell this? Are we going to have salespeople to do it? So this just shows that we're very kind of, it's very generous, the amount of funding we have for research. But then once we want to, we're investing millions and millions of dollars in research. But if we're not getting a return on that in terms of economic development, that's not really good, right? It's just kind of money sunk with the hope that perhaps something will emerge. So universities are trying to get much more proactive about moving that research into the marketplace. But the problem is there's not a lot of money in that middle part, right? Because are you going to invest, say you're an investor, are you going to invest in your faculty's research in the lab to try to bring that to market? Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you give one of your faculty members $50,000 to help commercialize? Go ahead.
Well, they already have a job, and so that the research they're doing isn't nothing more.
Maybe not, right? It's very early stage, right? It's not ready for prime time in terms of selling it to customers often, right? It's very basic, what we call basic research at the university oftentimes. Why else wouldn't you? There's a huge amount of risk involved, right? Financial risk for you, risk that the person, it might not have any value, risk that the person that you're entrusting to make a business out of it may not be able to, or may, stop doing it, like you said, right? They have a job, they may think it's a great idea, you invest $50,000, they never carry through. So typically people don't want to, and even investors don't want to give a lot of money to fund early stage technology. So there's this huge gap. Now then, when you start getting a customer, or you have a proof of concept, or it looks like it's more developed, then people are more willing to invest. Because why? Yes? Right, less risk, right? With each step you take, you're kind of de-risking it. So people have more evidence that maybe this is going to work. Maybe you have some market research. Maybe you've tested these products. And so people are there's more capital to get later as it gets more developed. So the big hole that we have is getting these ideas or getting these inventions through this kind of ugly period where nobody's going to pay you for it. Nobody's going to help you, really. I mean, unless they're completely passionate about it. So that's one of the huge problems in technology entrepreneurship for sure. All right, so who watches Shark Tank? What's the whole premise of Shark Tank?
Make a pitch, get funded.
Okay, why are they on there? They are getting some connections to sell, right? That's one. They need investors, right? Because why? They're not at the point that they're selling enough to self-fund their growth, typically, right? Because are you going to give ownership up if you don't have to? If you're making enough money to run the business, are you going to get outside investors? Why would you get outside investors? Why might you want to? Yes?
If you want to expand.
Exactly. If you want to expand, right? Sometimes you might be making a little bit of money, but not enough to go nationwide to really, make the business scale or, grow significantly. Why else might you want to raise money? Or what would you spend that money on? Yes?
A lot of tech has a high startup cost. So to build it, it's expensive at first, but then after you get all the stuff in place, the price goes down.
Right. You might need, usually on Shark Tank they already have prototypes, right? But you might need talent, you might need a sales force, you might need, a CFO, you might need people to grow as well. So anyway, sources of funding are friends and family, right? Who's borrowed money from their parents? Does it go well? Anybody have any bad experiences? What's your bad experience? You don't like, yeah, right? You have to face them at Thanksgiving if you lose all their money as an entrepreneur, right? That's not fun. Banks. Will a bank give you money for a tech company? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Why wouldn't they? Put it that way. Why would a bank not give you money? What do banks like when they give you a loan? Right, they want you to pay it back, yeah. And if you don't pay it back, what do they want?
More money?
They want to take your car, they want to take your house, they want to take something, right? So what do you call that? Collateral, right? So banks are typically not willing to invest in technology types of companies because, like we said, there's a lot of risk involved. If it doesn't go anywhere, there's nothing to seize, right? But if you have a building, if you have assets, if you've got machines, maybe you have, you know, they can get some money out of that. All right, angel investors, like I said, typically those are people in your community or who are, you know, have done well in business or entrepreneurship or doctors or whatever it might be. There are communities, what we call angel groups in the state of Indiana that entrepreneurs kind of go do, you know, Shark Tank types of pitches to. Typically they aren't very hands-on. They don't want to necessarily run your business. And then there's venture capitalists, which we hear a lot about. Like I said, you know, everyone thinks they have to get venture capital, but really it shouldn't be a goal if you don't need it, right? Because why would you give up ownership of your business if you don't have to? But sometimes because of all the hype, people think that's what the goal is, right? But the goal is to just get to liquidity and make money. And if all that money can come to you or, you know, your partners, that's probably a better thing. And then at the university, so venture capitalists are very hands-on, I should say that, right? You take money from other people. The way venture capital works is they've got a pool of investors that invest in their venture capital funds. That pool of investors wants money back from that fund, right? It's like a mutual fund. So their only goal, they don't care about you as the entrepreneur. Their goal, their loyalty is to the investors. So they'll do whatever they need to do, I mean, hopefully working with you, to make sure that company has the highest chance of success. If that means booting you out of the CEO seat, or if you're getting you off the leadership team, they can do that. So it's not always a good thing, because their goal is, what they're going to do is get out of your company, so exit, what they call exit out of your company, hopefully with a return of 20 to 50 or, you know, 200 or 300, or actually venture capitalists, like, you know, want a few, many X return, so they can give it then to their, like, investors or shareholders. And then another thing, because we have that valley of death that I talked about, right, and that, especially with university technologies in that area that people will not fund, there are other sources of funding. So the university here, we have what they call seed and startup funding. There are the National Science Foundation, government organizations have specific funds that help take these technologies a little bit further and do some of the market research and some of the kind of prototyping and things, some of those kind of intermediary things that need to be done so that there can be some evidence of success to try to get then other investors to be more interested. Anyway, you're not there yet though, so just trying to make you aware. Okay, communication. Who's a good presenter here? Who's pitched anything? Yes, what'd you pitch?
I have to pitch for money for Grand Prix and my ethics team as well.
Ah, pretty good. Okay, are you pretty good at it? You get,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. No, so pitching is huge, right? It's not just to get money all the time, right? But you constantly, as an entrepreneur, have to be convincing people that your idea is good, that your idea is better, that they should invest in you, that they should believe in you, that they should work with you, that they should help you, that they should take a meeting with you. So communication is pretty important as an entrepreneur. It's pretty important as a business person in general. Okay, I won't talk too much. All right, so people kind of think there are very lucky people who things just worked out for them, right? You look at these startups and you think, wow, that person was really lucky. They were smart and lucky. But the reality